Welcome to the Veil of Truth, your gateway to uncovering hidden insights and illuminating mysteries. I'm thrilled you've joined our global community. Whether you're watching from a bustling city skyline or a quiet countryside, we're glad you're here. Globe showing Europe, Africa, so tell me, where are you tuning in from today? Chapter 1, The Invitation to Ashcombe Hall. Hercule Poirot sat in his modest London flat, meticulously polishing the tips of his perfectly groomed moustache, when the post arrived. He regarded the letters with a deliberate calm, each one receiving his full attention. Among the usual correspondence, one envelope stood out, cream-colored, sealed with deep red wax, and bearing a crest that suggested pedigree and consequence. Poirot's small, dark eyes sparkled with anticipation as he broke the seal and unfolded the stationery. The writing was exquisite, deliberate, and slightly uneven, as if penned under duress. It read, Monsieur Poirot, I entreat your presence at Ashcombe Hall, my late husband's estate in Kent. An incident most distressing has occurred, and I fear there are forces at play that may soon turn dangerous. Your discretion and acumen are urgently required. Yours faithfully, Lady Clarissa Ashcombe. Poirot leaned back in his chair, tilting his head in his customary contemplative pose. He murmured, Lady Clarissa Ashcombe, widow. Forces at play. Mon Dieu. That is a curious choice of words. There is tension in the air, n'est-ce pas, Hastings? Hastings, who had been lounging in a corner with a newspaper, peered over the top of his spectacles. You're already intrigued, I can see that. Another murder, I suppose. Poirot smiled faintly, tapping the envelope. Not necessarily, mon ami. But when a woman of station writes with such fear, there is always truth hidden beneath the veil of propriety. Let us not dismiss what is concealed by polite phrases. Something has occurred that shakes the very order of the household. Hastings, who knew his friend well enough to appreciate that Poirot rarely concerned himself with trifles, simply nodded. Shall we go, then? Yes, Hastings. We must journey at once. The game, as always, is afoot. The train to Kent was enveloped in mist and drizzle, a pall of grey that seemed almost to mirror the unease Poirot felt beneath his outward calm. He sat by the window, observing the passing countryside with meticulous attention. Each farmhouse, each bend in the road, each cluster of leafless trees was catalogued with the precision of a mathematician. Yet, beneath the observation, Poirot's mind worked tirelessly, dissecting the possibilities of human behavior, motives, and deceit. Hastings, contentedly reading a railway magazine, tried to break the silence. I wonder what could have frightened a woman like Lady Clarissa. Ashcombe Hall has always seemed peaceful in the brochures. Poirot's eyes flicked to him. Peaceful, yes, but appearances are the mask worn by many, Hastings. One must look beyond the surface to perceive the currents of fear and passion that ripple beneath. Hastings frowned. You make it sound almost Gothic. Poirot smiled faintly. But Gothic is often closer to reality than we like to admit. Now, Hastings, let us prepare ourselves. When one enters the house of a widow in distress, one must arrive with both caution and elegance. Our behavior must calm suspicion even as our minds detect every anomaly. Upon arrival, the carriage drew up before Ashcombe Hall, a grand estate of imposing stone and ivy, shadowed under the lowering sky. Rain fell in steady sheets, drumming against the windows and puddling along the gravel drive. Poirot, stepping out carefully, took in the details of the mansion, the polished brass of the door fittings, the slight tilt of the upper windows suggesting age and wear, and the long lawns that vanished into mist. Every aspect, he noted, was a potential source of secrets or concealment. Lady Clarissa Ashcombe met them at the door. She was tall, with an elegance that seemed innate, even in morning black. Her hands, gloved in soft leather, trembled faintly as she extended one to Poirot. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice low and controlled, thank you for coming so swiftly. I feared that delay would allow all complications. Poirot inclined his head politely, noting the tension in her posture and the fleeting shadow of panic in her otherwise composed eyes. Madam, it is my duty and my pleasure. I assure you, I observe much before I speak, and nothing escapes me. Tell me, what has brought you such anxiety? Lady Clarissa hesitated, glancing over her shoulder as though the walls themselves might overhear. It is my husband. Sir Richard. He is dead. Her voice cracked slightly, but she quickly composed herself. I found him 2 nights ago, in the library. Dr. Selby declared it natural, but I know it was not. He was afraid of something, and I fear it cost him his life. Poirot's small eyes narrowed slightly. Afraid, madam? Fear is a most delicate instrument. One can see its influence even in the posture of a body after death. Tell me, was he ill before this? Lady Clarissa shook her head. No. He was vigorous, though perhaps a little anxious. He spoke of shadows, of whispers. I dismissed them as nerves. But in the end, she shuddered. I found him as if struck by terror itself. Hastings, ever the practical observer, muttered, terrible. But surely the doctor could explain. Poirot raised a finger. Hush, Hastings. Observe. Note the way Lady Clarissa's hands tremble. Observe the slight quiver in the corner of her mouth. Fear, grief, and perhaps something else, what is unspoken can be more telling than what is declared. Inside the library, Poirot walked slowly, every step measured. The room was large, lined with dark oak shelves, the kind that seemed to absorb sound. A fireplace dominated one wall, cold now, though ashes in the hearth suggested a fire recently burned. A leather armchair sat near the center, a decanter of brandy beside it. Poirot bent down and examined the chair, noting the position of the cushions, the faint indentation of a body recently removed, and the subtle scuff on the carpet. See, Hastings, Poirot murmured, even in death, Monsieur Ashcombe's posture tells a story. Observe the hand, placed as if to defend, the glass overturned but untouched by the carpet. A staged scene, perhaps, a tableau of terror. Dr. Selby, present and uneasy, protested softly. But Monsieur Poirot, natural causes could produce these postures. Poirot waved a delicate hand. Natural causes do not account for the mind's foreknowledge of terror, n'est-ce pas? No, Hastings, we are at the beginning of a delicate puzzle. One that requires not only observation, but understanding of the human heart. Lady Clarissa moved closer, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. You believe, then, that this was murder? Poirot smiled faintly, not unkindly. Madam, I believe that every death, even the most seemingly innocent, carries questions. And it is the answers to these questions which we must uncover, lest they remain as whispers in the corridors of Ashcombe Hall. As the evening drew on, the rain pattered relentlessly against the windows, and the shadows of the library deepened. Poirot stood by the hearth, contemplating the scene, his little grey cells already working tirelessly. Outside, the wind whispered through the tall elms, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and secrets long hidden. Poirot's mind raced with possibilities, motives, and the faint, almost imperceptible traces of human deceit that clung to every corner of Ashcombe Hall. Ah, Hastings, Poirot said softly, we have entered a house of shadows. And shadows, mon ami, often conceal far more than they reveal. Chapter 2, Shadows in the Library. The morning after their arrival, the storm that had clung to Ashcombe Hall for days seemed to retreat reluctantly, leaving behind a damp, silvery light that filtered through the tall windows of the library. The scent of wet earth and autumn leaves drifted in from the garden, mingling with the faint aroma of aged books and polished mahogany. Poirot, as always, rose early and moved about the house with the quiet precision of a man attuned to the subtlest disturbances in the air. He had requested that Hastings accompany him to the library, insisting that every detail of Sir Richard Ashcombe's death be scrutinized before visiting hours began. As they stepped into the room, the first thing Hastings noticed was the lingering chill. The fire had burned low and died, leaving the hearth a grey expanse of ash. A half-empty decanter of brandy sat upon the table, the glass beside it slightly askew. Poirot's eyes, small and penetrating, scanned the room with the care of a jeweller examining a rare gem. "Ah, Hastings," he said softly, "the library reveals more than the body ever could. Observe the glass. It lies beside the decanter, but the carpet beneath it is perfectly dry. Someone wished it to appear as though Sir Richard had drained his drink and dropped the glass in a tremor of fear. Very clever, but not clever enough." Hastings frowned. "You mean someone staged his death?" "Misjudged," Poirot replied. "The body was arranged. The chair pulled, the decanter left at hand, the hand raised as if in surprise. The scene is theatrical. But the true story is always hidden in the minutiae, the small, seemingly insignificant details that escape the hurried glance of the ordinary observer." Poirot moved closer to the desk, his gloved fingers hovering over an envelope half concealed beneath a blotter. He lifted it delicately, revealing a letter, unfinished and abruptly torn. The final line read, "Before the clock strikes 11, I shall put an end to." Poirot's expression darkened. Hummed interruption. Someone feared what this letter contained enough to prevent its completion. "Ah, Hastings, see how the mind plays tricks when it is pressed by fear or secrecy. One cannot merely read the words, one must feel their absence." He examined the blotter carefully, noting smudges of ink and a faint trace of perfume. "A woman, perhaps," he murmured. "Yes, subtle, refined, anxious." She touched this blotter, a light hand, hurried. But she left her signature, unintentional, in the smudge upon the corner. Hastings shook his head. "I don't see how you can tell all that from a blotter." Poirot tapped his temple lightly. "Ah, mon ami, it is not a question of seeing, but of understanding. The human soul leaves its trace in all that it touches, ink, furniture, a fallen paper. We must train ourselves to observe these signatures of behavior. One day, Hastings, you will see that murder is as much an art as a crime." At that moment, Dr. Selby entered the room, his expression cautious. "Monsieur Poirot, I must remind you, the coroner's report was clear. Sir Richard Ashcombe died of heart failure. Nothing suspicious." Poirot inclined his head politely, his small grey eyes narrowing ever so slightly. "And yet, Dr. Selby, the expression upon his face suggests a different cause. Fear, terror, surprise, these leave marks upon the muscles of the face, yes? Tell me, mon ami, do you deny that death may follow not only from disease, but also from the pressures of the mind?" Dr. Selby swallowed. I cannot deny that. But it is unusual. Misjudged, very unusual. That is why I am here. To unravel the unusual. To observe what is concealed beneath polite denial." Poirot turned back to the desk. "Ah, and here is further intrigue. The ashes in the hearth, disturbed. Someone burned something recently, hastily. A document, perhaps." Hastings leaned closer. Could it be the letter? Perhaps Sir Richard tried to destroy it himself. Poirot shook his head gently. "Non, Hastings. The letter was torn before the fire. Someone intervened. Observe, there is no singeing of the edges. The fire was prepared only after the deed had begun. A subtle, cunning hand indeed." The room seemed to settle around them, the weight of the unsaid pressing heavily upon the two men. Poirot walked slowly to the bookcases, examining each shelf with meticulous care. Books were slightly disturbed, a volume out of place here, a row pushed back there. Yet nothing appeared immediately incriminating. Poirot touched the edge of a shelf and felt the vibrations of a carefully concealed mechanism. He shook his head. "Ah, not today, not yet. But there is more here, Hastings. The house itself conspires to hide truths." Hastings, who had been silently observing, spoke quietly. "You make it sound almost alive. The house, I mean. But really, it's just a building." Poirot smiled, though it did not reach his eyes. "Ah, mon cher ami, the house is alive in the memories it keeps, the actions it has witnessed, the secrets it shelters. Every creaking floorboard, every shadow in the corner tells a story, if one is willing to listen." A sharp knock at the door interrupted their inspection. Lady Clarissa entered, carrying a small silver tray with a pot of tea and 2 cups. She moved with a controlled grace, though the tension in her shoulders betrayed her anxiety. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," she said softly, "I thought perhaps you would like tea. It has been a difficult morning." Poirot inclined his head in thanks. "Merci, madame. But the morning is far from over. Pray, tell me, did your husband have enemies? Friends whose trust he had lost?" Lady Clarissa hesitated, glancing out the window. "He had colleagues, business associates. Some who disagreed with his decisions regarding the estate and investments. But I cannot say that any harbored malice. Sir Richard was a man of principle." Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. "Ah, but principle can be dangerous. When the principle of one collides with the desires of another, tempers flare, and sometimes accidents occur. Tell me, madam, was he frightened in the days leading to his death?" "Yes," Lady Clarissa admitted. "He spoke of shadows at the window, whispers in the night. I tried to dismiss them as fatigue or imagination. But he seemed convinced that someone was watching him." Poirot nodded, his small finger steepled beneath his chin. "Precisely, madam. Fear is the clearest indicator of motive. Observe, the mind can be manipulated, persuaded, or broken by the mere suggestion of danger. And the one who suggests it, Hastings, is often nearer than the victim imagines." Hastings shivered. "You mean someone in the house?" "Mais oui. Who else would have the opportunity, the access, and the knowledge to stage such a scene?" Poirot's voice was gentle, yet carried an unmistakable authority. "This is why we must observe. Every gesture, every glance, every hesitation, they are all clues. And, as always, the smallest clue can unravel the largest deception." He returned to the desk, studying the unfinished letter once more. Before the clock strikes 11, what a curious note. The time is precise, deliberate. He feared an event imminent. And yet, the letter was torn, evidence of intervention. The mind that acted in secrecy has left us traces. "Ah, Hastings, mon ami, the game begins here, not with the discovery of the body, but with the observation of these delicate shadows that dance across Ashcombe Hall." As the sun rose fully, illuminating the dust motes that floated like tiny spectres in the library air, Poirot remained absorbed in his inspection. Hastings watched him, a mixture of admiration and unease in his expression. The library, once merely a room of books and furniture, had transformed into a theatre of human drama, where secrets waited patiently to be uncovered. And Poirot, as always, was ready to see them, not merely with his eyes, but with the keen, unerring logic of the mind, honed over years of meticulous observation. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, and a distant crow cawed, as if to signal the beginning of an intricate tale of fear, deception, and impending revelation. Ashcombe Hall, in its silence, seemed alive with secrets, and Poirot, as ever, was prepared to draw them forth. Chapter 3: The Guests of Ashcombe. By mid-morning, Ashcombe Hall had begun to stir with the measured activity of a household accustomed to routine, even under the shadow of recent tragedy. The rain had abated, leaving the gravel drive glistening and the gardens damp and heavy with mist. The great windows of the hall reflected the overcast sky, lending the house an austere, almost solemn air. Yet within, a more complicated drama simmered. Poirot, ever early and meticulous, had requested that the household gather in the drawing-room, a grand space lined with ancestral portraits and furnished with velvet chairs and polished mahogany tables. Hastings, who had followed reluctantly but with no small measure of curiosity, remarked quietly, "It's almost as if the house itself conspires to make one uneasy, Poirot." Poirot merely inclined his head, eye scanning the assembled guests with precision. "Hastings, the house is merely a stage. The players are what concern us. Observe them closely, for each gesture, each hesitation, each glance, speaks more than words ever could." The first to enter was Lady Clarissa Ashcombe herself. Her composure was immaculate, though Poirot noted the faint tremor in her hands and the tight line of her lips. She gave a gracious nod to the detective. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, I trust you had a restful night." Poirot's small eyes sparkled. "Restful, madam, if the mind is not troubled by anxiety, n'est-ce pas? But in a house such as this, with recent events, one's little grey cells must remain vigilant." Before Lady Clarissa could respond, Colonel Fitzroy arrived, a man whose age suggested long years of service and discipline. His smile was forced, a little too broad, and Poirot immediately observed the stiffness in his posture. "Good morning, Monsieur Poirot," he said, inclining his head. "I hear you are investigating the unfortunate death of my old friend. A sad business indeed." Poirot gave a slight bow. "Sad, yes, monsieur, but one must seek clarity. Clarity is the companion of truth." Next, Evelyn March, Lady Clarissa's niece, appeared. She was young, striking, and nervous, her dark eyes wide with what seemed an effort to appear unconcerned. Poirot's gaze lingered for a moment. The young lady's hands twitched slightly as she smoothed the folds of her dress, and the delicate flush on her cheek suggested a mixture of fear and, perhaps, guilt. "Ah, mademoiselle," Poirot said softly, "I hope the journey was not unpleasant." Evelyn inclined her head, her lips pressed into a thin line. "No, thank you, Monsieur Poirot. Ashcombe is familiar, at least." Dr. Selby, the family physician, arrived shortly after. A tall, thin man with an air of discreet authority, he seemed uneasy under Poirot's steady gaze. "I assure you, Monsieur Poirot, I observed everything that could explain Sir Richard's passing. The body was examined carefully. Heart failure is the most likely cause." Poirot's eyes did not leave him. "Ah, yes. But one must look beyond the obvious, Dr. Selby. Sometimes the obvious is a mask, a diversion. The human mind, like the body, is capable of deceiving itself." Finally, Giles Rennick, the estate manager, entered. He was a solid man, devoted to the household, yet Poirot immediately noticed the tension in his jaw and the quickness with which he scanned the room before settling his gaze on Lady Clarissa. "Good morning, Monsieur Poirot," he said with a hint of unease. Poirot inclined his head. "Monsieur Rennick, it is a pleasure to meet you. You know this house intimately, n'est-ce pas? You understand its rhythms, its moods, and, perhaps, its secrets." Rennick shifted slightly. "I do my best, sir." Poirot gestured to the group to be seated. "We are gathered not merely for civility, Miss Amos, but for the pursuit of understanding. Each of you, willingly or unwillingly, witnessed Sir Richard in his last days. Each of you had interactions with him, observed his fears, perhaps even contributed to the shadows that fell across his life." There was a noticeable silence. Lady Clarissa's hands rested lightly in her lap. Evelyn fidgeted with the hem of her sleeve. Colonel Fitzroy cleared his throat. Dr. Selby's expression was carefully neutral, while Rennick avoided direct eye contact. Poirot continued, speaking slowly, deliberately, as if measuring every word. "Madam, you have told me that your husband spoke of shadows, of whispers in the night. Mademoiselle, you have returned from Paris only recently. Colonel, Dr. Selby, Monsieur Rennick, you all had reasons, however small, to observe, to intervene, perhaps even to manipulate. Human nature is often more tangled than it appears." Evelyn shifted in her seat. I don't know what you mean. I didn't do anything." Poirot's small eyes fixed on her. "Ah, mademoiselle, that is not what I suggest. But you see, even innocence leaves traces. A glance, a hesitation, a faltering step. Fear or guilt can reveal more than words ever could. And the mind, when pressed, sometimes acts unconsciously." Lady Clarissa spoke then, her voice steady but quiet. "You believe one of us caused his death?" Poirot's lips curved faintly. "Not yet, madam. But we must examine all possibilities. Consider this, Sir Richard was a man of principle, resolute, yet he feared something so deeply that it hastened his death. Fear, as I have often said, is a subtle weapon. It can be wielded by suggestion, by pressure, by manipulation, or by the knowledge of secrets best kept hidden." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle upon them. And the one who knew how to instill such fear would have been close, trusted, and, alas, perhaps underestimated. Colonel Fitzroy bristled. "You imply one of us. Surely you have no proof?" Poirot inclined his head. "Proof is not required at this stage, mon colonel. Observation precedes proof. Evidence follows understanding. First, we must perceive the currents beneath the calm surface. And there are currents here, yes, even now." Rennick shifted in his chair, a faint flush crossing his face. Hastings noticed the subtle tightening of his jaw and the twitch of a finger. Poirot observed, unspoken, cataloguing each sign of tension, discomfort, or duplicity. Poirot rose and moved slowly to the fireplace. He examined the ashes once more. "Ah, see here, Hastings." The embers were disturbed, but not naturally. Some document, perhaps, burned deliberately. A letter removed, destroyed, or hidden. And yet, the murderer is often careless in small matters. That is why the smallest fragment can illuminate the largest deception. He turned to the group. "Each of you holds knowledge, not only of the house, of Sir Richard, or of his habits, but of each other. And it is these intersections of trust, suspicion, and passion that often reveal the truth." Hastings leaned closer to Poirot. "You think someone here is lying, then?" "Mais oui," Poirot whispered, his gaze sweeping the room. "Not necessarily consciously, Hastings. But every soul seeks to protect itself. And sometimes, protection requires concealment, and concealment requires action. We must watch carefully, for in Ashcombe Hall, the truth is as elusive as mist, yet far more dangerous." Lady Clarissa spoke again, her voice soft but firm. "Monsieur Poirot, I do not understand how my husband's death could be anything other than a tragic misfortune." Poirot inclined his head. "Madam, truth is rarely simple. That which appears as misfortune is often shaped by human hands. Fear, ambition, love, jealousy, each may act unseen. And it is for us to discover whether Sir Richard's passing was natural or orchestrated, by accident or by intent." As the guests settled, the tension in the room became almost tangible. The portraits on the walls seemed to watch, as though the ancestors themselves judged the living. Outside, the mist clung to the gardens, twisting the trees into strange, uncertain shapes. Poirot stood silently, absorbing every detail, every hesitation, every fleeting gesture. He turned finally to Hastings. "Ah, mon ami, observe. Each person is a universe, each gesture a clue. Patience, observation, the small grey cells, they are our allies. And one day soon, Hastings, we shall see how the strands of fear, secrecy, and human weakness intertwine. But not yet. Not until the tapestry is complete." Chapter 4 of The Night of the Storm. The storm returned with a vengeance that evening, as if the heavens themselves were conspiring to shroud Ashcombe Hall in fear. Rain lashed the windows in jagged sheets, and the wind howled through the eaves, rattling the shutters and sending branches scraping against the stone walls. The house, which had seemed merely solemn during the day, now exuded a sense of lurking menace, the corridors dark and shadowed. Poirot, as ever, moved through it with measured grace, alert to every sound, every movement, every subtle hint that might betray human intent. "Observe, Hastings," he murmured as they crossed the marble-floored hall, "a storm does not merely disturb the weather, it agitates the mind. Fear is heightened, secrets more easily revealed. Tonight, mon ami, the house itself is an accomplice." Hastings, carrying a candle, shivered slightly. "I wish the storm would pass before anything more happens. 2 deaths are already enough for one household." Poirot inclined his head. "Patience. Often, it is in the darkness that truth is illuminated. And the darkness tonight is most instructive." By 9 o'clock, the household had settled, each individual retreating to their respective rooms. Lady Clarissa had excused herself early, citing fatigue, while Colonel Fitzroy and Dr. Selby had retired to the library to read. Evelyn March had taken refuge in her room, where the shadows seemed to crowd in upon her like silent witnesses. Even Giles Rennick, usually composed, seemed unusually tense, pacing the corridors in intermittent bursts before returning to his quarters. Poirot, meanwhile, insisted upon a quiet vigil in the library. He lit a small candle and placed it upon the desk, then seated himself, his sharp eyes flicking from the decanter to the scattered papers, to the fireplace where ashes still hinted at recent disturbance. He did not need to close his eyes to see the patterns forming in his mind, the sequence of events, the timing of fears, the concealed actions of those who moved unseen in the night. Hastings, exhausted and uneasy, had taken a chair near the fireplace. "Do you expect something to happen tonight?" he asked quietly. Poirot smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in it. "I expect that what is inevitable may present itself. Sometimes, Hastings, the smallest incident reveals the grandest design. Observe carefully, the hands of those who act in secrecy tremble in anticipation." At precisely 10 minutes past 11, a piercing scream tore through the corridors of Ashcombe Hall. It was sharp, sudden, and laden with panic. Hastings leapt from his chair, nearly toppling the candle in his haste. Poirot, unflustered, rose and moved toward the source with the calm certainty of a man who had anticipated this moment. The scream emanated from the eastern wing, near the long corridor that led to the old summer house. Hastily, they navigated the winding corridors, the storm outside making every step echo like thunder. At the top of the stairs, they encountered Evelyn March, her dark eyes wide with terror, her hands trembling as she pointed toward the east. "Captain Hastings!" "Monsieur Poirot," she gasped. Someone is in the summer house. I saw a green light." Poirot's small eyes glimmered. "Ah, the green light. Not unimportant, Hastings. Observe the color, the timing, the deliberate choice. Whoever placed it there intends to signal, to warn, or perhaps to mislead. We must approach with care." Evelyn clung to Hastings as Poirot led the way, the candlelight flickering in the gusting wind. As they neared the summer house, the green glow became clearer, illuminating the fog that had settled heavily over the gardens. The light danced across the wet grass and the twisted branches, casting eerie, shifting shadows. Poirot's lips moved silently, as though speaking to himself. "Ah, Hastings, see the path." Wet, disturbed, but without footprints in the immediate vicinity of the hall's doors. Someone moved carefully. Someone knows the grounds intimately. Ah, yes, one does not merely enter the fog of Ashcombe Hall by accident. They arrived at the summer house, a small structure near the lake, its windows fogged and the door slightly ajar. Poirot pushed it open gently, revealing a single figure within, Evelyn, trembling, holding a lantern covered with green glass. She had evidently entered the summer house before Poirot and Hastings had reached it, trying to investigate or perhaps to intervene. "Oh," she cried. "I didn't know. I thought." She looked up, her expression a mixture of relief and fear. Poirot's sharp gaze assessed her from head to foot. "Ah, mademoiselle, you acted bravely, yes. But also recklessly. Observe, the lantern is a signal. Its green glass suggests caution, secrecy, a warning perhaps. But the signal itself is irrelevant unless we understand the context." Hastings frowned. Green light? Context. Poirot, what could it mean? Poirot shook his head slightly. "Not now, Hastings. One must gather facts first. Context without fact is merely imagination. We will uncover the truth soon." Meanwhile, back in the hall, a second, far more disturbing event occurred. Giles Rennick, the estate manager, was discovered in the stables, lying in a grotesque pose, his body sprawled across the polished floor. At first glance, it appeared as though he had slipped, perhaps struck by the storm or by a fall from the loft. Yet Poirot, arriving shortly after, studied the scene with his customary thoroughness. "Ah," he murmured, crouching beside the body. "Observe, Hastings. The position is staged, yet the evidence suggests no accident. See the absence of mud on the boots? The splintered hay is too neatly displaced. Someone wished to suggest a fall, yet has created an artificial scene. A deliberate tableau once more." Hastings shuddered. 2 deaths in one night. Poirot. What is happening here? Poirot straightened, eyes narrowing. The murderer grows desperate. When one secret is threatened, the keeper of that secret will act. 1 death is insufficient to protect it, 2 may still fail. And observe this, Hastings, the torn scrap beneath his desk. 3 words only, the green light. A clue, subtle, almost overlooked, but most important. A signal, a memory, a warning. Yes, Hastings, we are nearing the revelation. He rose slowly, his gaze drifting toward the library window. Outside, the mist lay thick across the gardens, curling like smoke across the lawns. At precisely 11 o'clock, the green glow reappeared, faint yet unmistakable, shining through the fog as if calling to someone, or perhaps warning of impending danger. Poirot whispered, "Ah, the game becomes more intricate, more subtle, more human." And within human intricacy, Hastings, lies the key to every deception. Returning to the main hall, Poirot gathered the remaining household members under the pretext of safety. Lady Clarissa's composure had begun to crack, her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of a table. Colonel Fitzroy muttered under his breath, unease creeping into his usual brash confidence. Evelyn, though visibly shaken, offered a weak attempt at reassurance, while Dr. Selby and Rennick had retreated into silent vigilance. Poirot, standing before them, spoke with deliberate gravity. "Miss Amiss, tonight, we have seen that fear is a powerful instrument, one wielded not always with malice, but always with consequence. Observe, the light, the body, the signals. Each is a message, and each message is intended for eyes of select understanding. But one truth remains, the house itself does not kill. Men and women do. And the mind, once manipulated by secrecy and fear, becomes both weapon and victim. Hastings, still trying to process the evening's chaos, muttered, "I don't know how you can stay so calm, Poirot." The detective smiled faintly. "Calmness, Hastings, is the foundation of observation. Only by serenity can one see the hidden patterns. And patterns, even in chaos, are most instructive. Tonight, the house has spoken, in screams, in green light, in shadows. And we, mon ami, must listen carefully if we are to understand its tale." As the household attempted to regain composure, the storm outside subsided, leaving the gardens glistening under the faint glow of moonlight breaking through parting clouds. Yet inside Ashcombe Hall, the tension remained, heavy and unbroken, a tangible presence in the corridors and rooms. Poirot, seated once more in the library, contemplated the events with a quiet intensity. "Ah, Hastings," he murmured softly, almost to himself, "the night has revealed more than it has concealed. And yet, the truth, the full truth, remains hidden. But soon, we shall see how fear, secrecy, and human desire intertwine to produce a drama most intricate and fatal." Chapter 5: The Locked Cabinet. The morning following the storm was bright but brittle, the autumn sun glinting off rain-soaked leaves. Yet inside Ashcombe Hall, an air of unease lingered, thicker than the mist that still clung stubbornly to the gardens. The household had yet to recover from the events of the previous night. 2 deaths in such a brief span, both suspiciously staged, had left even the usually calm servants pale and nervous. Poirot, however, moved through the hall with his customary precision and serenity, observing every detail of the rooms, the corridors, and the faces he passed. Hastings followed, notebook in hand, still trying to reconcile the 2 tragedies with Poirot's calm demeanor. "Mon ami," Poirot murmured, as they entered the library, "chaos is an art poorly executed. And yet, in poor execution, one finds patterns. Observe the desk, the letter, the chair, each detail whispers to us the story of last night. But there is more, Hastings, something hidden, waiting to be found." Hastings frowned. "More? I thought we had enough to keep us busy." Poirot waved his hand. "None, Hastings. The truth, true and entire, lies always in the hidden, the overlooked, the small and subtle. And I have a suspicion, yes, a strong suspicion, that Sir Richard Ashcombe kept more than documents on his desk. Some secret, perhaps the very secret that cost him his life." Poirot's eyes fell upon a tall, imposing cabinet at the far side of the room. Its doors were polished, the keyhole gleaming faintly in the morning light. Hastings observed his friend's fascination. "You think there's something in there?" he asked. "My's OUI. It is the simplicity of concealment, Hastings, which often deceives us. Sir Richard was a man who valued order, precision, and discretion. Such men are prone to keep secrets in places visible yet overlooked. This cabinet, closed, locked, unassuming, may conceal documents of great importance." Poirot searched his pockets and withdrew the small key they had discovered the previous night in the hidden recess behind the fireplace. Holding it delicately, he approached the cabinet. With a soft click, the lock yielded, and the doors swung open. Inside was a single envelope, cream-colored and labeled in Sir Richard's unmistakable hand, "For my wife, should anything befall me." Poirot held it lightly, turning it over. "Ah, intriguing. A final communication, mon ami. Yet, empty." Hastings' eyes widened. "Empty? Surely there must be something written inside." Poirot examined it carefully. "No, mon ami. The envelope has been emptied. But observe the folds, the slight smudge at the corner. Someone handled it after Sir Richard's death. Perhaps they removed its contents, or perhaps they merely intended to frighten, to protect, or to conceal. Either way, it is most instructive." Poirot rose and turned to the gathered household, who had entered quietly, drawn by the soft click of the cabinet. Lady Clarissa's eyes were steady, yet Poirot caught the faintest tremor in her hands. Evelyn March shifted nervously, while Colonel Fitzroy's face displayed the faintest flicker of unease. Dr. Selby's expression remained disciplined, but Poirot noted the slight hesitation in his step, as if he, too, had secrets to protect. "Miss Amiss," Poirot began, "here lies an envelope intended to reveal truths in the event of danger. And yet, the envelope is empty. Therefore, someone among us has intervened. Perhaps for fear, perhaps for gain, perhaps for protection. Ah, but the true nature of secrecy is revealed in absence, not presence." Lady Clarissa's voice was quiet but firm. "I assure you, Monsieur Poirot, I have touched nothing. I would never interfere with my late husband's wishes." Poirot inclined his head. "Madam, it is not accusation that I bring, but observation. Your hands betray care, caution, fear. A most natural reaction to such a delicate matter. Yet there is more to discover, yes. Much more." He moved to the desk and began to examine the surrounding papers. A ledger lay open, its pages neat and precise, recording investments and estates. Poirot noticed small annotations, almost imperceptible, in Sir Richard's hand, references to documents marked confidential, some with the phrase restricted access. He traced his finger along the margins, observing faint impressions of writing that had been erased or removed. "Ah," he murmured. "Invisible ink? Perhaps not. But a record of record-keeping, a trail of intent. Even the absence of words speaks. Hastings. Do you observe the care with which Sir Richard preserved his secrets? There is method here. And method, when violated, reveals its violator." Hastings nodded slowly. "So, the envelope was removed after his death. Misjudged. And by whom? That, my friend, is the question we must answer. And the answer is always hidden in small actions, in gestures, in subtle traces. Observe the folds, the smudge, the very orientation of the envelope in the cabinet. Someone replaced it deliberately, to mislead, or perhaps to delay discovery." Poirot's small eyes then shifted to the blotter on the desk, where traces of ink and the faintest scent of perfume lingered. "Ah, here is further evidence, Hastings. The hand that handled the envelope was delicate, light, and hurried. A woman, perhaps, yes. A woman of elegance, of subtle fear. Ah, but elegance does not equate with innocence." Evelyn's hand twitched slightly, and Poirot noted it with precision. Young mademoiselle, you are anxious, yes? But anxiety is not guilt. It may, however, suggest knowledge. Knowledge of events, of secrets, of the consequences of revelation." Lady Clarissa's gaze shifted toward Evelyn, but Poirot's attention remained fixed on the envelope. "And yet," he continued, "it is not only knowledge but the manner of concealment that instructs us. Someone among us feared the contents enough to intervene. Fear, Hastings, can motivate far more than anger or greed. And fear, once set in motion, often leads to tragedy." Poirot moved back to the cabinet, closing it gently and locking it once more. The sound of the key turning was almost ceremonial, signaling a moment of significance. He addressed the assembled household. "Miss Amiss, the locked cabinet is a lesson in secrecy. The contents are gone, but the evidence remains, a trail for the observant mind. The envelope was removed, yes, but by whom? And why? Was it to protect a family secret, to conceal financial dealings, or perhaps to prevent the revelation of something more personal?" He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. The hand that removed the envelope left traces, not only on the envelope itself but in behavior, in hesitation, in mannerisms. The careful observer notes these things. And the careful mind, Miss Amiss, begins to unravel the mystery without yet touching the body of the crime. Hastings whispered, unable to contain himself. Poirot, do you truly think one of them took it? Poirot's lips curved in a small smile. Miss Hastings. But not necessarily consciously. Often, people act out of fear, out of love, or out of misjudged loyalty. The removal of the letter was a step in a sequence, one step among many that will lead us to the truth. And the truth, when revealed, will be illuminating. He straightened and turned to the room, addressing everyone with quiet authority. Tonight, we shall observe the household closely. Every gesture, every glance, every hesitation may reveal the hidden threads that bind this tragedy together. And we shall see, yes, we shall see who among us moved, who concealed, and who perhaps is driven by fear into actions that none would anticipate. The sunlight from the windows glinted across the polished floors of Ashcombe Hall, but the shadows lingered in every corner, hinting at secrets still concealed. Poirot stood silently, observing, thinking, calculating. The envelope, empty as it was, had spoken volumes. And in the quiet of the morning, a single truth had begun to emerge. Someone had acted to prevent discovery, and the path to understanding that action would lead directly to the heart of the mystery, and, inevitably, to the revelation of the murderer. Chapter 6: The Second Death. The days that followed the discovery of the locked cabinet passed with a tense, uneasy rhythm. Ashcombe Hall, once a stately residence of comfort and calm, had become a theatre of suspicion. Every footstep echoed like a portent, every glance carried implication, and every conversation was measured, cautious, as though the walls themselves could betray a secret. Hastings, increasingly on edge, confided to Poirot one morning as they walked through the long corridor toward the library, "I can't help feeling that we are missing something obvious, Poirot. The envelope, the green light, and now this dreadful tension. It's as though the house itself is waiting to reveal the next tragedy." Poirot nodded, his small eye scanning the corridor, cataloguing the subtle signs of unrest in the servants' faces and the disarray of minor details that might indicate unseen activity. Hastings, often the obvious is a trap. The mind looks for simplicity, but the human heart is never simple. Fear, ambition, jealousy, desperation, all mingle to create acts that are illogical to those who see only the surface. They reached the library, and Poirot immediately turned his attention to the desk, where the empty envelope had been discovered. He inspected the blotter, the smudged ink, and the faint trace of perfume once more. The removal of the letter was not merely secrecy, Hastings. It is a prelude. A move in a game whose rules are known only to those who are willing to act decisively, and, perhaps, recklessly. Later that evening, the household gathered in the drawing room for dinner. The mood was strained, punctuated by silence and occasional nervous laughter. Lady Clarissa sat at the head of the table, her composure carefully maintained, though Poirot observed the faint tremor in her hands as she poured her wine. Evelyn March, restless, fidgeted with her napkin, occasionally casting uneasy glances at the assembled company. Colonel Fitzroy and Dr. Selby exchanged brief, guarded remarks, while Rennick, ever vigilant, seemed to observe everyone with a faintly protective air. Poirot, seated at a discreet distance from the centre of activity, watched them closely. Hastings, he murmured under his breath, the art of dinner, in this household, is not nourishment but observation. Note the tension in each gesture, the hesitation in speech, the subtle avoidance of the eyes. Each movement is a clue, a thread in the web that surrounds Sir Richard's death. As dinner progressed, the storm that had abated days before returned, less violent but insistent. Thunder rumbled in the distance, the wind rattling the windows. Poirot's attention, however, was not on the weather. He noticed subtle changes in the household's demeanour, Evelyn's sudden pallor, Lady Clarissa's hand tightening around her wine glass, Dr. Selby's barely perceptible flinch as a crash of thunder shook the room. "Notice, Hastings," Poirot whispered, "how fear affects the body, even in those who believe themselves composed. Observe the interactions, small but meaningful. They reveal who is hiding, and who fears exposure." Just after dessert, a sudden commotion erupted from the eastern wing. A loud crash, followed by a strangled gasp, drew everyone from their seats. Poirot, moving swiftly with his usual deliberation, led Hastings toward the sound. As they rounded the corner near the old study, they found Giles Rennick lying lifeless across the floor, a heavy candlestick toppled beside him. At first glance, it appeared as if the fall had been accidental, perhaps caused by slipping in the darkened corridor. Poirot knelt beside the body, his eyes scanning every detail with exacting precision. Observe, Hastings. The angle of the fall, the positioning of the body, carefully arranged. The candlestick is displaced, yet there is no damage to the parquet. Someone has staged this scene. The death is no accident. Hastings swallowed hard. 2 deaths now, Poirot, this household is cursed. Poirot shook his head gently. Not cursed, Hastings. Calculated. Methodical. The hand that moved here is the same that interfered with the envelope. Observe the absence of mud, the deliberate misalignment of objects, the subtle signs of coercion in the body's pose. This is the work of someone accustomed to manipulation, to controlling appearances. The household reconvened under Poirot's instruction in the drawing room. The tension was nearly unbearable. Lady Clarissa's composure had begun to crack, her eyes darting nervously toward the eastern wing, while Evelyn's fingers trembled on the edge of her chair. Colonel Fitzroy's usual confidence faltered, and Dr. Selby's calm veneer seemed to fray at the edges. Poirot addressed them with quiet authority. Miss Amos, 2 deaths, both carefully staged, both intended to mislead and confuse. And yet, the evidence is not lost, it is only concealed. The hand that acts in secrecy leaves traces, in hesitation, in glance, in the smallest inconsistency. He moved toward Evelyn, observing her with a precision that made her flush. Mademoiselle, your behavior during the evening has been most instructive. Tremors, pauses, glances, signs of fear, perhaps not for yourself, but for the consequences of knowledge. Tell me, did you enter the corridor this evening before the commotion? Evelyn's lips parted, but no words emerged. Lady Clarissa intervened, her voice steady but urgent. Evelyn would never, she was at her seat the entire time. It must have been someone else. Poirot's small eyes glittered. Ah, madam, one need not act consciously to be implicated. Presence, awareness, the smallest action, all leave traces. He turned to the entire group. Observe, all of you. The pattern of fear, secrecy, and manipulation is becoming clear. Sir Richard's death was not isolated, Rennick's is no accident. Someone here is prepared to act, to intervene, and perhaps to kill again. And the motive? Often, Hastings, the motive lies not in malice but in protection, in concealment, in fear of exposure. Poirot returned to the library later that night to examine the corridor where Rennick had fallen. Candlelight flickered against the polished wood, shadows dancing across the walls. He noted faint scuff marks on the floor, too irregular to be natural, suggesting movement by someone familiar with the corridor's layout. Hastings, Poirot said, gesturing to the marks, see the directionality, the subtle variations? This indicates more than a stumble. Someone guided the scene, manipulated its appearance, intended for the discovery to be misleading. Observe the care, the control. Only someone accustomed to manipulation could produce such precise deception. Hastings shivered. It's almost unbelievable, Poirot. How can someone plan all this so carefully? Poirot tapped his temple lightly. Hastings, the mind can accomplish many things when driven by fear, desperation, or knowledge of secrets. And secrets, Miss Amos, are the most dangerous of all instruments. As they left the library, Poirot paused by the window overlooking the gardens, watching the mist curl along the lawns. Somewhere in the darkness, the movements of the household continued, subtle, secretive, unseen. and Poirot, as always, observed, catalogued, and contemplated. "Ah, Hastings," he murmured, "the night has revealed more than daylight. 2 deaths, both deliberate, both calculated. And yet, the ultimate truth remains concealed. Fear, manipulation, secrecy, they have begun their work. But soon, the threads will lead us to the one who orchestrates, to the mind that directs, to the heart that beats behind these shadows." The storm had passed, leaving a fragile stillness. Yet Ashcombe Hall remained a place of tension, a house alive with secrets and lies, and Poirot's little grey cells were already at work, arranging the puzzle pieces into a pattern that, though invisible to others, was slowly becoming clear to him. Chapter 7: Secrets Unveiled. The morning following the second death dawned with a grim clarity. Sunlight, though bright, failed to warm Ashcombe Hall. The hall seemed heavier, as if the very walls absorbed the tension, fear, and unspoken truths that hung thickly in the air. The household moved with caution, avoiding sudden gestures and glances, as if the knowledge of tragedy had left them all on edge. Poirot, as always, rose early. He dressed with meticulous care, selecting his cravat and waistcoat with deliberate precision. Hastings, who had grown increasingly anxious, noted his friend's calm demeanor and whispered, "I wish I could share your confidence, Poirot. 2 deaths in one house, how can one possibly remain calm?" Poirot's small eyes gleamed. "Hastings, calmness is not mere serenity, it is clarity. One must observe, think, and prepare. The human mind, when subjected to fear and secrecy, reveals its secrets in subtle ways. Today, Hastings, we shall see more than we have ever seen, if only we observe carefully." Poirot's plan for the day was simple yet intricate. He would speak individually to each member of the household, probing for inconsistencies, motivations, and subtle cues. He began with Lady Clarissa in the drawing-room, her hands folded neatly, though her knuckles were pale. "Madam," Poirot began softly, "I wish to understand your relationship with Sir Richard. Not the polite, public one, but the private. Were there disagreements? Pressures? Worries?" Lady Clarissa's eyes flickered, and she took a shallow breath. "Sir Richard was resolute, as I have said. But yes, there were disagreements. Matters of the estate, of financial decisions, and of certain investments. He was cautious, perhaps too cautious, and sometimes that caused tension." Poirot nodded, steepling his fingers. "Ah, tension. A most natural condition, but one that can breed fear. Did he speak to you of fears beyond financial matters? Concerns for his safety, perhaps?" Lady Clarissa hesitated, then shook her head. "No, at least, not to me. But he was concerned about Evelyn, yes. He feared she might be influenced by others, friends in Paris, acquaintances." She paused, then added softly, "and he mentioned someone in the house, someone he did not fully trust." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Interesting, madam. And did he name this person?" "No, he never named anyone. Only hinted." Next, Poirot spoke to Evelyn March. She had been pale and restless since the second death, her dark eyes haunted. Poirot approached her gently. "Mademoiselle, I understand that you have knowledge of certain, unusual events in the house. Fear need not be guilt, but knowledge is often revealing." Evelyn swallowed and wrung her hands. I don't know anything that would help, Monsieur Poirot. I was frightened last night, yes, but only because of what I saw in the gardens. The green light. I thought it meant danger." Poirot's small eyes observed her keenly. "Ah, yes, the green light. A signal, yes, but for whom? And what did it signify? Fear, mademoiselle, is a powerful teacher. It reveals truths even when words cannot. Tell me, did you enter the summer house intentionally?" Evelyn's lips trembled. "Yes, I thought I could help. I did not know. I did not touch anything. Poirot nodded. Very well. Courage, even imperfect, is commendable. But sometimes courage intersects with danger, yes. Colonel Fitzroy was next. A man of discipline, he attempted to project authority and calm, but Poirot's gaze penetrated beyond the surface. Colonel, Poirot began, Sir Richard's death has left questions. You were close to him, were you not? Military comrades, perhaps. Fitzroy inclined his head. Yes, yes, we served together. I respected him. But my interest in his affairs is minimal. I was a friend, nothing more. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Yet even friends may influence, guide, or obstruct. Tell me, Colonel, did you observe anyone acting strangely during the last week? Fitzroy hesitated. Rennick, he seemed agitated. More than usual. But surely you don't suggest he had anything to do with Sir Richard's death? Poirot smiled faintly. Agitation is not guilt, mon colonel, but it may be a symptom. Observe carefully how humans behave when fear and secrecy collide, and we shall see the truth. Dr. Selby presented a more difficult challenge. Calm, deliberate, and composed, he attempted to maintain neutrality. Poirot approached with the utmost care. Dr. Selby, he began, you were aware of Sir Richard's health, naturally. Heart condition, yes? Selby nodded. Correct. He was under observation for some months. Poirot tapped his fingers together. Yet you agree, I presume, that the circumstances of death are unusual. Selby's expression stiffened. I am bound by professional opinion. Heart failure remains the likely cause. Poirot inclined his head. Ah, yes. But even a professional must consider human intervention. Fear can accelerate disease, human hands can accelerate death. You see, Hastings, the mind is as fragile as the body. And it is in the mind that the murderer often acts first. Finally, Poirot spoke to Giles Rennick's replacement in the household staff, a young maid named Lottie, who had witnessed the storm and the movement around the hall. Her testimony proved enlightening. She had seen shadows, movements, and the green light in the gardens. She could describe shapes, positions, and timing. Poirot listened with patient care, cataloguing every subtle detail. Lottie, he said, fear makes humans perceptive. The smallest observation, when recorded carefully, reveals patterns invisible to those who act without thought. Did you see anyone near the summer house last night? Lottie hesitated, then whispered, yes, someone in a cloak. I couldn't see their face, but they were careful. Very careful. Poirot nodded. Exactly. And care implies familiarity, Hastings. Someone who knows the house, its schedules, and its inhabitants intimately. And that, Miss Amis, brings us closer to understanding the orchestration of events. By afternoon, Poirot had gathered the household in the library, arranging them in chairs around the room. His small eyes moved from one to another, as if weighing not only their words but their silence, their posture, their hesitation. Miss Amis, he began, the events of the past week, the death of Sir Richard, the staged death of Rennick, the mysterious envelope, the green light, all are connected. The human mind, driven by fear, may act in secrecy, and in secrecy, traces are left. Every hesitation, every gesture, every glance is evidence, whether recognized or not. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the room. Some acted out of loyalty, some out of fear, some out of self-preservation. But the threads are clear. Someone here, yes, one among us, has taken deliberate steps to manipulate perception, to conceal truth, and to act with dangerous intent. And the method reveals the mind behind it. Calm, calculated, precise, yet human. and therefore, fallible. Poirot's gaze rested momentarily on Evelyn and Lady Clarissa, then swept the rest of the room. Soon, Hastings. Soon, we shall see how the strands converge. Fear and secrecy, manipulation and motive, they form a tapestry. And I, with my little grey cells, shall unravel it, thread by thread, until the truth stands fully revealed. Hastings, though still tense, felt a glimmer of hope. Do you truly think we'll know the murderer soon? Poirot smiled faintly. Mais oui, Hastings. The final act approaches. The house has revealed its secrets slowly, as houses do. And those who act in fear often reveal more than they intend. Now, we wait for one more piece, the final revelation that will allow the pattern to be seen clearly. Outside, the autumn wind stirred the trees, scattering leaves across the wet lawns. Inside, Ashcombe Hall was quiet, but charged with anticipation. Shadows moved in corners, the weight of hidden truths pressing on all present. Poirot sat in his chair, small, calm, and focused, his mind already piecing together the puzzle that would soon unveil the ultimate secret. Chapter 8: The Masterful Solution. The evening descended upon Ashcombe Hall with a quiet yet intense gravity. The sun had set behind a bank of clouds, casting the great house into soft shadows. Within, the household moved with a heightened sense of alertness. After 2 deaths, the discovery of the empty envelope, and the mysterious green light, tension had reached its peak. Yet Poirot, as always, was composed, his small eyes gleaming with anticipation and calculation. Hastings approached him in the library. Poirot, the household is nervous beyond measure. They whisper in corners, steal glances. I fear another tragedy might occur before we understand what is happening. Poirot smiled faintly, folding his hands. Hastings, patience. The human mind acts not in haste but when the time is right. And the time for revelation, yes, has come. Tonight, we shall gather the threads and illuminate the entire pattern. Poirot instructed the household to assemble in the drawing room. Lady Clarissa, Evelyn, Colonel Fitzroy, Dr. Selby, and the remaining servants entered, all with apprehensive expressions. Poirot stood before them, small and calm, yet every gesture carried authority. Miss Amiss, he began, the events of the past week have been most instructive. 2 deaths, that of Sir Richard Ashcombe and the unfortunate accident of Mr. Rennick, a mysterious green light, and an empty envelope meant to convey truth, all these are pieces of a larger puzzle. And tonight, we shall complete the picture. He paused, letting his words settle. Observe, first, the envelope. Cream, addressed to Lady Clarissa, meant to reveal matters after Sir Richard's death. Yet it was removed, emptied, and returned. Who did this? A person of elegance, careful hands, and subtle fear. Not malice, but concern. A person who knew both the house and the habits of its late master. Evelyn shifted uneasily. Poirot's gaze, small yet penetrating, fell on her. Ah, mademoiselle, courage sometimes betrays the innocent. You touched the envelope in fear, yes, but the removal itself, no. That act was executed by another. Poirot's small eyes flicked to Lady Clarissa. Madam, Sir Richard trusted you implicitly, yet he feared the consequences of disclosure. A secret existed, not merely financial, not merely personal, but one which could ruin reputation and relationships if revealed. Someone else, however, sought to conceal this secret for different reasons. He walked slowly around the room, observing every movement. The green light, a signal, a warning, not to frighten, but to direct attention. Someone in the house, familiar with its every passage, used this signal to manipulate fear, to control timing, to influence perception. Observe carefully, such precision is not accidental. Poirot paused, letting a small smile touch his lips. Now, let us consider Mr. Rennick's death. At first glance, an accident. Yet the candlestick displaced, the body carefully posed, the floor undisturbed, all signs of deliberate staging. The purpose was not simply to kill, but to mislead, to suggest randomness, to sow confusion. A calculated act. Hastings whispered, unable to contain himself. Poirot, but who could commit such meticulous deeds? Poirot raised a finger, not to rebuke but to emphasize. Hastings, look around. Observe each gesture, each hesitation, each faint glance away. Fear leaves traces, even in the most composed. The hand that staged Mr. Rennick's death is the same that manipulated the envelope. The same hand that ensured the green light created alarm yet misdirection. Poirot turned to the assembled household. Monsieur Colonel, you may be brave, disciplined, courageous, yet even courage cannot conceal subtle tremors. And you, Dr. Selby, calm, professional, but aware that fear can dictate action. Each of you has motives, yes, but only one acted with a mixture of precision, fear, and the desire to protect. And that one was guided by love. The room fell silent. Poirot's gaze rested on Evelyn. Ah, mademoiselle, the courage you displayed last night in the summer house was admirable, yet it revealed more than intended. You acted out of concern for family, yes, but not for yourself. And in this concern, subtle actions, moments of hesitation, glances, interruptions, created misperceptions that misled others, and even almost misled yourself. Evelyn's lips trembled. I did not harm anyone. Poirot shook his head, gentle but firm. No, mademoiselle, you did not. The acts of deception, the manipulation of perception, were executed by another, someone whose love, yes, but misguided fear drove them to act decisively. He turned to Lady Clarissa. Madam, you acted to protect your family, particularly young Evelyn, from scandal. The envelope, removed, emptied, replaced, was intended to conceal sensitive information that Sir Richard feared would be misinterpreted or exploited. The green light, the signals, they were meant to control the sequence of events, to prevent panic, to influence the perceptions of others. Lady Clarissa's eyes widened. I acted out of love, yes. But I never intended anyone to be harmed. Poirot inclined his head. Ah, madam, and therein lies the lesson. Love, when combined with fear, can guide human hands into actions of great consequence. Mr. Rennick's fall, unplanned yet manipulated by circumstance, was a result not of malice but of intervention, timing, and misjudgment. Every event followed logically once one understands human emotion, fear, and intention. Poirot raised his hand slightly, emphasizing the clarity of his deductions. Observe the sequence: Sir Richard's death, natural in origin but accelerated by fear, the envelope, removed to conceal truth, the green light, a signal used strategically, and the unfortunate accident of Mr. Rennick, manipulated subtly to control timing. Each act, connected by intention, motive, and observation, forms a single chain, a chain whose weakest links were revealed in gestures, hesitation, and fear. He turned finally to Hastings. Hastings, the puzzle is complete. Human nature, Miss Amos, is most revealing when fear intersects with love and secrecy. The murderer? None, strictly speaking. The architect? Yes, Lady Clarissa, guided by love and fear, acting to protect family, not to harm. The secondary death? An accident, yet made plausible by circumstance and human intervention. And the green light? A signal, yes, but a signal intended to prevent panic, not to direct violence. Hastings blinked. So, no one intended to kill anyone else. Poirot smiled faintly. Exactment. The tragedy was orchestrated by circumstance, guided by fear, and misinterpreted by observation. The human mind is a curious instrument, Hastings, capable of error even when acting from the noblest intentions. And it is this interplay, love, fear, secrecy, misunderstanding, that produced the illusion of a murder plot. The grey cells, however, see the truth clearly. Poirot addressed the household as a whole. Miss Amiss, tonight, we understand that the series of events, Sir Richard's death, the manipulation of documents, the green light, Mr. Rennick's accident, all stemmed from human emotion, not criminal intent. The patterns we observed, the signals, the misdirection, were intended to protect, to conceal, and to preserve harmony. And yet, they created tension, fear, and apparent mystery. But the truth, once revealed, brings clarity and relief. Lady Clarissa's eyes glistened. I only wanted to protect Evelyn and the family's reputation. I never imagined it would cause so much fear. Poirot nodded gently. Ah, madam, intention is the guiding light of human action, yet consequences often diverge from intention. It is the task of the detective not only to see what happened but to understand why, and to reveal the pattern hidden beneath human complexity. He turned to Hastings. Observe, Hastings, how the smallest gestures, the faintest hesitations, the minor deviations from routine, when collected carefully, tell the entire story. Fear, secrecy, and love, these were the architects of the apparent mystery. And the grey cells have illuminated the truth. The household exhaled collectively, the tension easing as the intricate threads of misunderstanding, fear, and protective love were revealed. Ashcombe Hall, though still sombre, seemed lighter, freed from the weight of suspicion and uncertainty. Hastings leaned toward Poirot. Remarkable, Poirot. As always, you see what no one else can, the hidden pattern, the real motive, and the human heart behind it all. Poirot smiled modestly, folding his hands. Hastings, the mind is a mirror. One must observe carefully, with patience and attention, and the reflection will reveal all. The house has spoken, the human heart has revealed itself, and now clarity reigns. Justice, in its truest form, is understanding. As night fell over Ashcombe Hall, the wind outside subsided. The halls were still, the shadows long but unthreatening. Within, the household had been restored to a fragile calm, their fears allayed, their understanding deepened. And in the library, Poirot sat quietly, small, composed, yet triumphant, the mystery, intricate and carefully layered, resolved at last by the unerring precision of his little grey cells.